Alright, so before we actually talk about time, I thought I would actually finish this up and move on to differences in kind versus differences in degree. That's actually on the second page of your notes after memory. But the reason I actually wanted to talk about differences in kind versus differences in degree is because differences in kind actually rely on the concept of duration plus one other concept, that being um, extensity. So let's just move on to that first before going on to issues with space and time, and just time in general. Um, a reminder that duration is also composed of composites or made up of composites. And I just wanted to cover that final point there. So, okay, differences in kind. Um, well, um, if you recall that the essence of something tends to be a difference in kind between other things. So, for example, um, if I were to say that you've got two round fruits, um, they're both the same size, they both weigh the same amount, but one is uh, the color orange and is dimpled and is a citrus. The other one is red um, and uh, is essentially an apple. So the differences between the two objects, let's say they're identical shape, identical weight, um, the differences here would be the differences in kind. Okay. Now, that differs from differences in degree, which we'll talk about a little bit later, which deals with things that um, are homogeneous in nature or are quantified via units or sizes or figures. Whereas differences in kind are quantified or qualified by their qualitative properties. Um, so differences in kind are composed of two things. They're composed of duration and extensity. Now, we already talked about what duration is. It's the successive qualitative changes, but extensity is actually the attribute or an attribute of sensation whereby space or size is perceived. So it takes both successive qualitative changes or qualitative changes or um, um, or sequences that permeate each other, or different aspects, or intensive properties, plus extensities, or the perception of space and time. So those are what those are two attributes, duration and extensity, that make up differences in kind. So differences in degree, on the other hand, are a little bit different. And it looks like the slide presentation isn't following along with my notes, but that's fine. I'll come back to space and time, so let me just kind of move forward on this. And, oh, well, maybe I didn't actually include my lecture or a slide on differences in degree, but so I'll come over here. So this is kind of just a brief analogy, but difference in degree, okay? So differences in degree are more homogeneous in nature. So homogeneous being these are all circles, these are all blue circles, but the differences is in degree. So in size, in the thickness of the lines, those are all differences in degree. Versus differences in kind, um, such as what we have here. Okay, so there's certainly two different differences. most people and most designers even, they only look at the world um, as differences in degree, whereas we should be actually focusing more on identifying differences in kind versus differences in degree. You might have um, several different cars or several different boats, and they all might have different sizes and shapes, but the, the differences in kind might be a boat that is a rescue boat versus a pleasure boat versus a tugboat. Those are all differences in kind versus differences in solely degrees or sizes. Um, let's see here. I think I may have gone out of sequence, so let me see if I can back up a little bit here. And there we go. All right, so our next topic, I can speak back. Okay. So our next topic is actually space-time. So um, we we previously had talked about space, and hopefully you guys read the articles from the last class um, on space. But then when you take time and you incorporate it into space, then you get this relative creature, which essentially space-time depends on the presence of matter and motion, and space-time is actually relative. Um, but time by itself is infinite, yet it's measurable. Okay, we're able to look at our watch and we're able to literally measure time. It's homogeneous in nature. There are no um, successive qualitative changes within time per se. It's very numerical and lacks any quality whatsoever. Um, it doesn't preserve space, and it's all about the quantities versus the qualities. Um, and so I just wanted to cover that again. But you know, Albert Einstein is the individual who first discovered the space-time continuum, and how he discovered that space and time is actually relative with regards to matter and actually motion, but specifically gravity. So I found this quote to be quite interesting. My computer's running a little slow, so hopefully it'll take me to the next slide. So John Wheeler says that matter tells space how to curve, and space tells matter how to move. And I found that really interesting because if you look at this image below the quote, um, you see a picture or an image of Earth, and you see this grid, and this grid is actually supposed to represent space. And due to the gravitational pull of the Earth, space actually is deformed. And so therefore we can actually conclude that space is an entity. It is actually a physical form. It is a physical object. Otherwise, if it was a nothingness, kind of like how I believe it is Plato describes it, if space were nothing, or space were just this void that had no qualities to it, then it would not be able to bend. You cannot bend something that does not exist. So I thought this is a really great image showing how the gravity of the Earth is actually bending or distorting space. All right, so all this together encompasses space-time. Oh, I guess I did have a few slides of differences in degree. Um, so once again, here's an example of differences in degree versus differences in kind. All right, so moving on to memory. So there are several different aspects of memory. There's pure memory, there's memory image, and then there's perception. Now, all of this happens exactly at the same time. Every single day of your life, you actually have pure memory, you have a memory image, and you have perception. According to Bergson, Henri Bergson, the philosopher, pure memory only really happens once. It's that first moment that you see something new, that you identify with something that you've never seen before, um, and then ever since that moment, then that image or whatever it is that you're perceiving becomes a memory image. Um, Now, perception also is occurring constantly, but you're not necessarily relying on that pure memory when you're incorporating perception. A good way of thinking about it is I recall going back to Spain several decades after living there as a child, and my memories of the old house I used to live in southern Spain um, weren't exactly completely accurate. Um, Certainly things have changed, but the house didn't change really. The street didn't change a whole lot according to my parents, but as a child, I had this memory, and so we actually reconstruct memories over and over and over within our mind. And we do this within space and we do this within time. So there's a reason why I included memory within the space, time, and duration lecture. Um, One of the things from a design standpoint that really begins to um, allow you as young designers to understand what memory is imagine taking a piece of paper and folding it in half. That crease on that piece of paper is a memory of the action that you just made or just created. When you unfold that paper, you will see a crease down the middle. Okay, so that paper now has a memory. It is embodied with memory. It is embodied with the event of you taking that piece of paper and folding it in half. And so that's probably one of the best analogies of thinking about memory when it comes to design. Memory also, when incorporated well, can display decay or a weathering of objects. So the question is, when it comes to design, how can we design into objects components of time and components of memory that will respond to duration and decay and weather, um, and in some ways, um, just as a gentleman in that documentary Objectified stated that the product actually gets better over time as it weathers, as it in some ways decays or breaks in. Um, Excuse me, and allow me to do a quick time check to see how